Monsters Incorporated is one of Pixar's best movies. Sharply written, with fun characters and a tight story, it's nearly flawless. Well, what if I told you that in the mid-2000s, Disney, without the blessing of Pixar, almost made a Monsters Inc. sequel that would have seen Mike and Sulley trapped in the human world on a quest to reunite with Boo? Well, that's the movie we'll be discussing today, with the help of one of the cancelled movie's writers, Rob Muir, as we break down the development, plot, and cancellation of the unmade Monsters Inc. sequel, Monsters Inc. 2: Lost in Scaradise. The year was 2004, and Disney and Pixar were at war. After a few years of mounting tension between the two companies, it was announced that once Pixar finished out their current deal with Disney, they would not be renewing it, and their partnership would be over. Behind the scenes, the head of Disney at the time, Michael Eisner, wasn't at all shaken by this loss. In fact, he believed that Disney didn't need Pixar, because as a part of their deal, Disney owned everything that Pixar created while working with them. This meant that Disney was technically able to make sequels to Pixar movies regardless of Pixar's involvement. And this is what Eisner decided to do, figuring that nobody would really know the difference. To do this, Disney opened up Circle 7 Animation in 2005. They had a simple goal: create Pixar sequels and have them release annually. The first sequel they had planned was Toy Story 3, which was set to release theatrically in spring of 2008. Monsters Inc. 2 was to follow in 2009, and Finding Nemo 2 in 2010. Disney began taking pitches for Monsters Inc. 2 in spring of 2005, and after hearing around 40 pitches, selected the writing duo of Rob Muir and Bob Hilgenberg to pen the script. The story came to them pretty quickly when they were thinking of what would be the next logical step for Mike and Sulley.
I remember, obviously we had to watch Monsters Inc., the original, over and over and over. And the thing that stuck in our heads was the fact that life has changed. I mean, at the end of the movie, life really changed. Instead of scaring kids, they're making them laugh, which falls right into Mike's wheelhouse. And then we just kind of thought, well, so what would that be? What would that be like now? And Water News is gone. Who replaced him? Well, Sulley. Sulley got promoted, and Mike is killing it on the floor because he's so funny. And if Mike moved up to the management, then he's not visiting Boo as much. And that becomes something that he really misses, that relationship he had with Boo.
Their vision for the movie saw Mike and Sulley getting trapped in the human world on the eve of Mike and Celia's wedding, meeting all types of new banished monsters like the Jersey Devil and El Chupacabra, as they try to reunite with Boo and return home.
It seemed like every culture, like you have the Abominable Snowman, you have the Loch Ness Monster, the Jersey Devil, Chupacabra. I mean, it was great. And I do, now I'm recalling when we pitched it, that was the thing that really got them excited, is introducing these new characters, but keeping it within the world and keeping it believable.
It was still early days on the project, to the point that there wasn't even a director attached, though some animation directors were being considered. But Rob and Bob's pitch really shaped the direction for the project, and everybody there was serious about making the best movie possible.
That was our goal. Our goal was for Pixar to be able to see this movie and say, well, they stay true to the characters and true to the world.
By all accounts, things seemed to be going well. There was an interesting story in place, and everybody involved seemed to be happy with its direction. But very quickly, it all began to unravel. And before we get to why that was, I want to, for the first time ever, exclusively reveal to you the film's plot. So without further ado, let's take a deep dive into Monsters Inc. 2: Lost in Scaradise. Our story begins at the wedding of Mike and Celia, right before Mike has to say "I do" at the altar and promptly faints. The walls lift up to reveal that this was a practice simulation for Mike, who can't manage to get the words "I do" out no matter what he does. It's made Celia delay their wedding 3 times already, and she's furious. She tells him that if he's not ready to say "I do" at the altar that Sunday, she's never marrying him. Later that day, Sulley, who's now the CEO of Monsters Inc., is visited by Roz, and they get to talking about if he ever misses the old days on the scare floor, the competition, the notoriety, and the action of his old job. Sulley tells Roz that he definitely doesn't miss scaring kids, but he does miss spending time with Mike. and how they're going to be spending even less time together now that Mike is getting married and moving out. It's clear that Sulley is happy for everybody else's successes and bright futures, but he doesn't exactly feel comfortable and happy where he is. This is made more evident when he loses his temper after hours of clerical work trying to change his printer's ink. He loses his cool and balance, slamming into a filing cabinet and knocking its contents all over the office. While cleaning up, Sulley comes across Boo's file and instantly becomes lost in a flood of memories of his past few years visiting Boo. Teaching her a monster's lullaby, Boo showing him a loose floorboard in her room where she keeps all of her valuable items, and her drawing with a glow-in-the-dark pen. Mike enters the room, breaking Sulley's daze. He tells Mike that it's Boo's birthday tomorrow and invites him to come visit her. But Mike says he can't because he's going out to a pre-wedding lunch with his and Celia's family. As they exit the factory, Mike is confronted by the wealthy and self-obsessed Reginald Flankbottom, Celia's old boyfriend, who belittles and berates Mike for not being able to say, "I do." After picking up Mike's family from the airport, he and Sulley spend the night packing up his stuff from the apartment. They reminisce and laugh as they pack up old pictures and talk about how not that much is going to change with Mike moving out. But deep down, they both know that things will really never go back to the way they were. After an awkward beat of silence, Mike tells Sulley that he could afford to be late to lunch tomorrow, and that he'll come with Sulley to see Boo. The next morning, Mike and Sulley try to call down Boo's door, but for whatever reason, her keycard isn't working. They think nothing of it and call the door down manually. Sulley tries the door, but it's locked. Mike tells Sulley not to try and force the door open, and he responds by slamming the door with all of his might, forcing it open. They approach Boo's bed, but there's one problem. Boo isn't there. Instead, a woman in her 70s lays asleep. As Mike and Sulley realize that something is very wrong, the woman begins to open her eyes. Mike tenses up and asks Sulley if she can see them, but Sulley responds by telling Mike that she's way too old to believe in monsters, so they're essentially invisible to her. Sulley checks underneath the loose floorboard, and sure enough, Boo left him a letter. It reads, "Dear Kitty, I have moved to a new house," before abruptly ending. Just then, the woman's dog tries to attack Mike, causing him to backpedal into the closet door, accidentally closing it. And since this technically isn't a kid's room anymore, they can't use that door to get back. They're stranded. They leave the house and try to find a new one with kids inside of it, which they eventually do. And there isn't just one kid there, but an entire slumber party. Despite this, they promptly botch their escape attempt, getting scared by the younger brother sleeping upstairs and bolting from the house into the back of a newspaper delivery truck. The kids inside the house are freaking out, begging the parents to call the cops because there's something in the house. As the police wrap up, reporting the call as a false alarm on account of the kids talking about monsters being in the house, their transmission piques the interest of Simon Nerlich, a nerdy 30-something and self-proclaimed monster hunter who was listening in on his police scanner. He decides to go and visit the kids at that house, where he gets a description and drawing of what the monsters look like from the kids. Meanwhile, Celia, her family, and Mike's family wonder why he's running late to their pre-wedding lunch. After the newspaper truck comes to a halt and opens its door, Mike and Sulley find themselves in a sprawling city. Hijinks ensue which see Mike fall down a manhole, and as Sulley pulls him up from the sewer, his horn is ripped clean off the left side of his head. Mike's misfortunes continue as he gets attacked by toddlers and hit by a car. At this point, he's fuming. Blaming Sulley for his missing horn, he grabs Sulley's horn and starts gnawing on them in retaliation, which catches the attention and laughter of a little girl. Mike and Sulley follow her back to her house and try to use her door to return home, but it doesn't work. They try another kid, and another, but for whatever reason, none of their closet doors are working. Completely demoralized, they walk along a city street until they come across a comic book shop. In the front window, they notice a display advertising a new comic book and are surprised to see that it looks just like Randall. They slip into the store and find the comic, which claims that the monster lives in the swamps of South Florida, which Sulley remarks isn't too far away. Sulley speculates that Randall may actually be able to help them figure out how to get home. Mike objects, but Sulley raises the point that Mike's getting married tomorrow. They're out of options. As they leave the store, Simon, who works at the shop, manages to catch a glimpse of the two monsters. After failing to chase them down, he notices the Swamp Creature comic book on the ground, and knows exactly where they're headed. Simon and his coworker Rodney gun it to the swamps in his beat-up van, and Rodney is excited to see a real monster. But Simon explains to him that seeing monsters is an ability that very few adults have. Mike and Sulley steal and crash an airboat, but eventually make it to the swamps and are found by Randall. Sulley asks for his help, but he refuses. That is until Mike and Sulley manage to rescue him from being captured by Simon and promise to unbanish him if he helps them get home. Randall explains that every year around this time, all of the monsters who've been banished to the human world meet on an island in the Bermuda Triangle to socialize, and that he knows a monster there that might be able to help them. Sulley asks how to get to the island, and Randall explains to him that just like how the laughs and screams of kids create energy in the monster world, monsters emit a ton of electromagnetic energy in the human world, and that this energy allows monsters to ride interdimensional air trails in the sky to a vortex in the Bermuda Triangle. The three of them steal a ton of balloons and float into the sky, and once they get high enough, they're sucked into the jet stream of stratospheric energy and are hurled through clouds, rain, and electromagnetic flares of light, before eventually bursting out of the clouds and finding themselves floating above a beautiful tropical island. Back at the restaurant, everybody, including Mike's family, is beginning to doubt that he'll make it to lunch. Just then, Flankbottom, who's been hiding out in the corner of the restaurant, lying in wait to win back Celia's heart and marry her tomorrow instead of Mike, makes his way over to the table and tells them that Mike sent him to tell them that he and Sulley got caught up in a work emergency, that he's sorry he missed lunch, but that he will definitely be at the wedding tomorrow. Instinctively, Celia throws her arms around Flankbottom, and everybody, from both families, remark just how great he is. Mike, Sulley, and Randall make their way up the beach and are greeted by none other than the Abominable Snowman. Randall asks him if he knows where El Chupacabra is, and the Abominable Snowman leads them through an entire Monster Island resort before they eventually wind up at the official mixer for the Banished Monster Association, brushing past monsters like the Jersey Devil, Loch Ness Monster, and Mongolian Deathworm in the process. At the party, a sexy voice calls out to Sulley. He turns around to see his ex-girlfriend Anastasia, or as she's known in the human world, Bigfoot. Sulley thought that she left town after a fight they had, but it's revealed that Waternoose actually banished her. If that hadn't happened, her and Sulley would have likely still been together. There's still very much a romantic spark between these two, but before anything could happen, Randall grabs Sulley and tells him that he found El Chupacabra. As Mike, Sulley, and Randall enter El Chupacabra's office, there's a tense atmosphere. Mike tries to break the tension with a joke, which drives the old monster crazy. He rages how he designed the original doors and how when he questioned their unethical use, Waternoose banished him. How after 40 years of being stuck here, Mike comes to him with jokes? Sulley tells him that Waternoose is gone now and that he's in charge, and that in exchange for his help, he's going to pardon all of the banished monsters when they get home. El Chupacabra is overjoyed and explains that to get home, they need to find Boo and go through her door in order to return to the monster world. Mike and Sulley realize that they still don't know where Boo's house is, and Mike storms out of El Chupacabra's villa, resigned to the fact that he's never getting married and that they're stuck in the human world forever. Sulley makes his way to the beach. He sits alone and reads Boo's letter again. Defeated, he looks out over the horizon as the sun sets. But as it does, the letter begins to glow. He looks back down at the letter, and the second half, written in glow-in-the-dark ink, reveals itself, showing Boo's new address. Back on the mainland, one of Simon's gadgets goes off, detecting a massive influx of electromagnetic energy 20 minutes away. Mike, Sulley, and Randall make their way to Boo's new house, showing up in the middle of her 7th birthday party. And despite Sulley wanting to reunite with Boo more than anything, he knows what needs to be done. The three of them slip into the house undetected, find her room, and open her closet door, only to see the inside of an ordinary closet. Boo rushes into the room, and Sulley is overjoyed. He calls out her name, but she doesn't acknowledge him. Sulley tries again to get her attention, but nothing. The reality of the situation is that Boo can't see Sulley. She doesn't believe in monsters anymore. Sulley is devastated. Randall blames Mike for the situation, and at this point, Mike's going to miss his wedding. He's had enough. The argument quickly shifts to one between Mike and Sulley. He lunges at Sulley, but is held back by Sulley's huge wingspan. The tension is broken by a laugh. They turn around and see Boo's little brother, who approaches them with a drawing of he and Mike. He knows exactly who Mike Wazowski and Kitty are. Randall tells them that it doesn't matter if he knows them, as long as Boo doesn't, they're stuck. They realize that they need to remind Boo of their existence if they want to go home. And after a failed attempt of teaching Boo's brother stand-up comedy, Sulley notices Boo singing outside and has an epiphany. Sulley takes Boo's brother to the far corner of the yard where they're having her birthday party, and they start to sing the monster's lullaby that he used to sing to Boo. Boo hears her brother and breaks off from her friends. As she approaches him, the song starts to have a hypnotic effect. She harmonizes with her brother and begins to see Sulley materialize in front of her and is overcome with emotion. Boo and Sulley hug. Just then, Simon bursts into the backyard and tackles the big blue monster to the ground, but quickly realizes that he didn't tackle Sulley, but a man in a dinosaur costume who was entertaining other kids at the party, who all promptly begin to beat him up. Sulley and Boo slip away into her room. She sees Mike and hugs him. She sees Randall and slaps him. They notice the commotion outside, and Mike and Randall head toward the door, urging Sulley to hurry up, which leaves Boo sad and confused, asking if he's leaving already. Sulley hesitates for a second before leaving Boo with a wildly unsatisfying goodbye. As Boo leaves her bedroom, Rodney pops out from under her bed and catches the closet door right before it closes, leaving it open just a crack. Simon enters the room and Rodney explains to him how they just left using the closet door. Simon immediately decides to follow them back to the monster world so he can capture a monster for himself and prove their existence. The lobby of Monsters Inc. has been transformed into a beautiful wedding chapel. All the guests are gathered, but they're also annoyed since Mike is 45 minutes late for his own wedding. Flankbottom tries to make a move on Celia when Mike bursts in and explains to Celia what's been going on. Meanwhile, Sulley calls down a series of doors to the laugh floor, and one by one, all of the banished monsters emerge, except for the abominable snowman, who they all forgot to tell that this was happening. As they exit to go to the wedding, Simon pops out from behind one of the doors and begins to snoop around the factory. While Sulley and the newly pardoned monsters hustle to the ceremony, Mike is already standing at the altar, finally ready to say I do. And just as he's about to, Simon shows up and sends everyone into a blind panic. Simon steals Celia in the commotion, Mike meets back up with Sulley, and they take off to save her. As they search for them, they manage to find Simon's wallet and driver's license on the floor. They find Simon in the laugh canister storage room. He stands on one of the shelves, throwing the canisters down at Mike and Sulley. And on impact, the seals on the bottom of the cans crack, releasing highly pressurized laugh energy, shooting off like missiles, and flickering all of the lights. In the chaos, Simon and Celia escape while Mike and Sulley are covered in an avalanche of canisters. Roz, Randall, and the pardoned monsters burst into the room to help dig them out, when one of the stray cans pops off and scores a direct hit on a wall full of canisters. The set of cans begins to teeter. If it falls, the outcome would be catastrophic. So the pardoned monsters band together to steady the wall as Mike and Sulley continue their chase. Simon bumps into Flankbottom and demands to know where the doors are. Celia pleads for help, but he cowers and tells Simon immediately. He and Celia make their way to the door vault using a maintenance platform. Simon jumps up and grabs one of the doors. He and Celia are going for a ride. Mike and Sulley chase them up to the maintenance platform and quickly realize that they're too far away to reach them. But seeing a cart of full laugh canisters, Mike gets an idea. He mounts one of the cans and asks Sulley to break the can seal. Nervously, Sulley does so. Mike rockets towards the door and is just able to grab Celia before it runs out of energy, sending the nearlyweds plummeting hundreds of feet as Simon escapes. But right before they hit the ground, Sulley, riding 2 canisters, swoops in and saves them before landing. Sulley pulls a kill switch to stop all of the doors and rushes to his office, ripping through a bunch of papers. Eventually, everyone convenes on the laugh floor. As they enter, Simon is able to guess his way into activating a door. The others tell Sulley to just let him leave, but Sulley knows better. If he lets Simon go, he knows how to come back, and others will come too. Sulley plants himself between the door and Simon, who smugly meets Sulley face to face and threatens him. Sulley flips the conversation when he pulls out Simon's old file from when he was a kid who they used to scare at the factory. One of his particular fears happens to be hairy monsters with fangs. Sulley's disposition changes on a dime as Simon backs away in fear. Sulley unleashes a truly terrifying roar as Simon goes completely numb. The newly pardoned monsters also descend on him, and Sulley realizes exactly the place in the human world he's sending him back to. At Mike and Celia's reception, the newlyweds celebrate, Flankbottom hangs his head in defeat, and Roz flirts with the Loch Ness Monster and El Chupacabra. As the music dies down, Sulley turns to Mike and tells him that he's quitting management. He toasts to new beginnings, and Mike, unsure of the future, reluctantly clinks glasses with his best pal. Our story ends in Boo's room. She and her brother are laughing their heads off at the stylings of Monsters Incorporated's newest comedic duo, Mike and Sulley. As they finish their routine, Sulley tucks Boo into bed and tells her that he will always be there for her. Boo hugs Sulley and tells her newly remembered friend that she'll never forget him. As they exit the room, Mike reminds his best friend that eventually Boo is going to forget him. Sulley turns to Mike and tells him, "Yeah, I know, but that's okay. I'll remember for the both of us." This script is excellent. Between all of the banished monsters, Randall's mini redemption arc, and the idea that people age out of believing in monsters, there are so many interesting ideas that add such texture to the Monsters, Inc. world. Everything was here for the team to make a satisfying sequel. So that raises the question, with so much promise and potential for the sequel, why did it get canned? The very same week that Circle 7 opened its doors, Michael Eisner announced his resignation as Disney's CEO, leaving the position the following September. As fate would have it, Lost in Scaradise was actually the last pitch that he would ever hear for Disney. Eisner was replaced by Bob Iger, who knew just how valuable Disney and Pixar's partnership had been over the past decade. Iger renegotiated with Pixar, and the result was Disney purchasing the company outright in January of 2006 for over $7 billion. Circle 7 was designed only to make Pixar sequels, and with Pixar, who now might want to make those sequels themselves one day, back in the fold, this buyout put Iger in a tough spot, and the fate of Circle 7 into question. In the immediate aftermath of the purchase, theories flew around the halls of Circle 7 as to what its fate would be. The prevailing theory was that the sequels would continue on, and Pixar would send their people down to make sure everything felt authentic. But there was one underlying fear.
That was our biggest, in retrospect, our biggest fear, not just Bob and me and myself, but everybody working there. They were afraid that they're going to get back together. Pixar was going to come in and say, "Thanks for starting this, now we'll take over."
And then disaster struck. One day, Circle 7 out of nowhere called all of their employees to a meeting, led by Ed Catmull, one of the founders of Pixar and one of the newly appointed heads overseeing all of Disney's various animation divisions.
It was a big announcement that Disney and Pixar are renewing their relationship and everything's going to be great. And Ed was saying everything's going to be fine, everyone's got their jobs, everything's good. And then somebody at the end raised their hand and said, "What about Circle 7? And he just paused for a second. He said, "Oh yeah, we're shutting that down." And then after that meeting, it didn't seem like there was much hope for our script.
And with that, Monsters, Inc. Lost in Scaradise was officially canceled. And I think that's a shame, because this script truly was something special. It followed up on the original movie in a way that felt like a totally natural extension of that world, introducing interesting and unexpected new characters, and continued Mike and Sulley's story with just as much heart and humor as the original film. In the end, I think it's a massive loss that Lost in Scaradise was never made. But that's the story of Monsters, Inc. 2, Lost in Scaradise, and the end of yet another episode of Canned Goods. So until next time, thank you so much for watching, be good to each other, and stay Hemmas.